Farming is often described as humanity's great leap forward. But the first farmers usually worked harder, ate a narrower diet, and lived with more infection than many hunter-gatherers. Their skeletons often became shorter, their teeth developed more cavities, and their settlements exposed them to waste and disease. So why did humans give up a life that could be healthier and less repetitive for fields that demanded work every season? Skeletons from early farming communities often show shorter average stature, more dental decay, and signs of nutritional stress than those of nearby hunter-gatherers. Farming could concentrate calories, but it also narrowed diets around a few staple plants. A larger food supply did not automatically mean better nutrition for each individual. The right question is therefore not why farming was better. It is why cultivation created a system that could support more people, store more calories, and expand faster, even when many individuals worked harder and suffered more disease. Agriculture was not invented once. Wheat and barley were domesticated in Southwest Asia, rice and millet in East Asia, maize in Mesoamerica, potatoes in the Andes, and several crops in Africa and New Guinea. Different communities entered similar feedback loops between plants, population, and settlement. The end of the last ice age brought the relatively stable Holocene climate after about 11th and 1700 years ago. Stability did not make farming inevitable, but it made seasonal plant growth more predictable. In parts of Southwest Asia, dense stands of wild wheat and barley could be harvested repeatedly with sickles and grinding stones. Wild grain offered an unusual combination: high energy, dry storage, and harvest in bulk. Seeds could remain edible for months if protected from moisture, insects, and rodents. This turned a seasonal abundance into a delayed food supply and made longer residence at one place possible. Longer residence increased local population. Mothers no longer had to carry every child and all possessions during frequent moves. Stored food could support weaned children, elderly relatives, and specialists, but more mouths also increased pressure to produce the next harvest. This created a ratchet. More reliable calories allowed population growth. Population growth made a return to low-density foraging harder. Once a valley contained many farming families, the surrounding wild resources could no longer feed everyone if cultivation stopped. Farming therefore spread partly through demography rather than persuasion. A farming community could endure higher child mortality, yet still grow if birth intervals shortened and more children survived to adulthood. Over generations, population size became a decisive advantage. Wild cereal ears naturally shatter when ripe, scattering seeds before people can collect them. A mutation that keeps the ear attached is bad for a wild plant because it cannot disperse, but useful to a harvester because the seeds remain on the stalk. People using sickles preferentially collected plants whose seeds stayed attached. Some of those seeds were spilled or deliberately sown near settlements. Each harvest therefore selected slightly more strongly for non-shattering plants, even before anyone understood heredity. Seed size changed too. Larger seeds often germinate strongly in disturbed, cultivated soil and are easier for humans to notice and collect. Repeated sowing, weeding, and harvesting altered the reproductive success of plants. Domestication was evolution inside a human-made environment. Domestication was slow. Archaeobotanists measure the proportion of non-shattering rachises, seed size, and weed species in charred plant remains. In many regions, centuries or millennia separated intensive cultivation from fully domesticated crops. Animals followed different pathways. Dogs formed relationships with humans long before farming. Sheep, goats, and cattle were later controlled through selective killing, protection, and breeding. Herd management changed age and sex profiles visible in animal bones. Cereal grains are rich in carbohydrate but can be poor in certain amino acids, vitamins, and minerals when they dominate the diet. Phytate in grains can bind minerals such as iron and zinc. Processing, fermentation, and mixing foods reduce the problem, but poor households often lacked dietary variety. Sticky cooked starch feeds acid-producing bacteria in dental plaque. The acid dissolves tooth enamel, causing cavities. Dental caries became more common in many farming populations, although the pattern varied with crop type and food processing. Permanent settlements concentrated human waste near water and living areas. Parasites spread through contaminated soil, while close contact with livestock created opportunities for pathogens to cross species barriers. Density transformed isolated infections into repeated chains of transmission. Heavy repetitive work left marks on skeletons. Grinding grain for hours could strain knees, backs, and shoulders. Field clearing, digging, and carrying water imposed different stresses from mobile foraging. Agriculture reorganized labor by age and sex, often making hidden domestic work relentless. Yet farming also created buffers. Stored grain could bridge a short seasonal shortage, and domesticated animals supplied milk, blood, meat, hides, and manure. The system was dangerous but productive enough to support recovery after many local failures. A basket of berries disappears quickly. A granary can hold months of food. Stored surplus can be counted, guarded, inherited, taxed, or stolen. Agriculture, therefore, turned food into durable property and created new conflicts over land, water, and access. Land improvement strengthened claims. Clearing trees, building terraces, and digging canals required labor that families did not want to abandon. Investment tied people to place and made boundaries more important than they had been for highly mobile groups. Surplus could support craft specialists, ritual leaders, and armed retainers who did not produce all their own food. But specialists depended on farmers, and whoever controlled storage could influence who ate during scarcity. Archaeologists detect growing inequality through house size, burial goods, and unequal access to imported materials. Inequality did not appear everywhere at once, and many villages resisted central control, but storable wealth made durable hierarchy easier to build. Farming thus changed politics because it made production visible and extractable. A ruler cannot easily seize tomorrow's wild berries, but officials can measure a field, record a harvest, and take part of a stored crop. Farmers did not always defeat foragers in direct conflict. Often they expanded into open land, intermarried, exchanged crops, and absorbed local knowledge. Ancient DNA shows both migration and mixture. The spread of farming was a patchwork, not one uniform conquest. Where population density rose, disease immunity and organized defense could favor larger settlements despite their internal costs. More people meant more labor for walls, canals, and harvests, and more fighters during conflict. Agriculture also altered ecosystems so thoroughly that returning to foraging became difficult. Fields replaced woodland, herds changed vegetation, and stored crops attracted dependent pests. Human niches became engineered landscapes. The farming transition was therefore not a simple improvement. It was a demographic and ecological trap with enormous creative potential. It produced villages, surplus, specialists, and eventually cities, while also intensifying disease, labor, and inequality. The next transformation followed from farming's greatest achievement: concentration. Once thousands of people depended on fields, canals, and stored grain. They needed ways to move food, control water, settle disputes, and survive epidemics. The first cities were not merely large villages. They were machines for coordinating dependence.